Okay. Half-hearted agile adoption. Okay. Where do you start? Why don't we do a scenario where somebody comes to us and they say, "Oh yeah, we're agile. We do stand-ups and we write user stories. We're agile, right?"
Yeah,
that's a concept. Yeah. How many times have we heard that?
Yeah, too many. Yes.
So what makes that a half-hearted agile adoption then, I suppose? Just because it's only a couple of practices.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think what's happened there is people have recognized and adopted some of the practices, but what they've completely skipped over is the agile values and the principles behind them. And so they're going through the ceremony, they're going through the actions, but they're not really doing it in a way that is going to get that mindset change or the long-term cultural change and transformation that we would usually hope to see. I suppose it's a bit like your best mate who's just passed his test, teaching you to drive a car. You know, turn this, flick that knob, move the gear stick there, but you don't really understand why you're doing it. You understand it makes the car go, but you're going to make the car go in a direction, but not necessarily get the benefits long term. If anything, you're going to end up with worse driving habits than you should.
Yeah. So with the practices, people can be going through the motions of, standing up and talking to each other each morning without even understanding the intent of what they're trying to actually achieve through that. So there's this classic of the Scrum zombie pattern. People say, yesterday I did some work, today I'm going to do some work, no impediments, right? And then at the end of it, and I've seen this before when people have finished the daily Scrum and it's like, thanks guys, that's the daily Scrum for today, and people suddenly go, oh, I need to talk to you about X and Y. I need to kind of coordinate, what we're doing today. And I'm like, wasn't that the whole point of the daily Scrum? Yeah. Well, why didn't we actually talk about what's meaningful to coordinate as part of the daily Scrum? Right? So.
And then what I've seen off the back of that is where people then suddenly start to not actually recognize the benefit in the stand-up because they're not getting it. So then they do something worse. They stop having the stand-up. They go, we won't have one today. We'll do one on Wednesday instead.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are some of the more sort of obvious, things at the more kind of
the practice-based ones.
Practice sort of level. But I think there's a lot more deeper than that, I guess, to talk about. And I think Mindy tweeted something about process change without addressing the culture. Right? So, I think there's sort of practice adoption where it's just kind of doing these practices, you're often doing them within the status quo organizational structure with the existing roles and responsibilities still in play and with a whole lot of existing constraints around it. And it's one of the big challenges is really rethinking that structure, that when moving into teams that we want them to be cross-functional and include the skills we need to go end-to-end and be able to do value-adding features. And what is value? What is it we should be producing as a team at the end of each iteration? It's, that's just the start of it. But there's a whole lot of things, I think, that go to really management, really thinking about the implications of the values and principles. I guess that's what it is that Nick was mentioning, right? On a whole lot of things which may have been around for many, many years. The way that people are incentivized and the way that the groups are perhaps functional groups set up around business analysis and around testing and these sorts of things. And now we're trying to get people to operate in a cross-functional capacity, and it really requires, really rethinking those organizational structures, which, and ultimately structure has a really big influence on culture. If you get
well, that's what they say, isn't it? They say if you change the environment or the structure first, that will have the immediate biggest effect on that cultural change. And taking a point you just made about structure and how do we change the process without addressing culture. Yesterday I was delivering a course and somebody raised the point that in their organization they have 175 projects currently in their existing process structure, 175 annual projects on the go. They already know they don't have enough resource to source those up, but there is an agile pilot that's going quite successfully right now in that organization. But then if they want to, and the staff that are working in that pilot are 100% assigned to the project. But of course, all the other projects in the organization are currently working on those 175 projects. Everybody is currently 4 to 5, sometimes 6 projects on the go for a single person. Now, try and go agile when you've got that amount of work being distributed across a low number of resources. Like you said, you've got to change the structure first, and that's really quite difficult to do, to try and convince people that you've got to do less to finish more.
That sounds like a line out of large-scale Scrum.
It does. It almost does. Yeah.
More with less is one of the taglines, and it relates to a whole lot of things. Exactly that sort of thing. More value with actually less. Different roles and structures and bureaucracy, essentially. Yeah.
What we've been talking about here, though, is a lot of these are still all practices, and granted, some of them are significant practices, like change your organizational structure to fit the delivery model. But actually, there's behind all of that is the culture that we mentioned earlier, and the ability to change people's mindsets and behaviors within the organization. And my experience has plenty of half-hearted agile options that I think are even if they go as far as changing bits of structure within the organization without introducing that culture of learning and without introducing that the kind of continuous improvement elements and the willingness to fail and to learn from those experiments and those failures, you still don't get the long-term benefits that you're looking for.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ray. I mean, again, going back to the values and the principles, you could adopt as many practices as you want, but if you haven't dealt with the values and the principles, then you're just going through the motions. You're not really understanding why it's better to produce working software instead of lots of documentation. And when I see people who attempt to try and do something about that without the core understanding, so going back to our half-hearted agile thing again, that lack of understanding causes all these myths that I've been talking about recently about, that there's no documentation on agile projects. Working software is the key. No comprehensive documentation. They take it literally, and actually do
more than literally. Take it further than written. Actually,
there's just no documentation at all, which obviously is a bit of a half-hearted agile adoption. So if we focus around that half-hearted agile adoption, that's pretty much for me that's where I see it. It's that lack of understanding or misunderstanding of what the values actually mean and how you go about actually living by those values, which is the culture piece. Addressing the fact that to change our culture, we have to change group behaviors, and to change those group behaviors, you've got to change underlying beliefs. So to start off, you've got to change people's beliefs at that value level to the point where they understand that working software is better than comprehensive documentation, and focusing on what the client wants as opposed to a really good internal facing project management report that says how well we're doing as an organization at project management,
or your boss.
as opposed to the customer going, I really love this software you've just delivered. Those for me are what are driving these badly adopted agile approaches.